وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. So, inshallah, we will continue the discussion today on social ethics and good manners. Before we look at the specific topic for today's session, I want to just give a little bit of a preface. And this is that Islam is a very social religion. Some of us as people, we are introverted. Some of us are extroverted. Generally, Islam, if I get sick, I don't want anybody to come, I don't want people to find out. Then Islam says, no, come out of your comfort zone. Iyadat is recommended. This is something, maybe you've seen this in a culture change, that sometimes, somebody gets sick and the mother says to all her friends, please pray for my son or pray for my daughter because they're sick. And then people call and the child comes back to the mother and says, why did you tell everybody? Why did you tell your friends? I didn't want them to know. This is a common problem. Right? Now, of course, as a parent, you should be aware that your kids may have a different expectation or a different culture. You shouldn't, sometimes we gossip too much. That's not good. But in general, Islam wants us to share not our problems, because that should be private. But what do I mean by not sharing my problems? If I'm in pain, I shouldn't come and say to you, oh, I have this problem, I have this pain, I have this, that. Don't share, your weakness. But if I'm sick, well, that's not a private issue. I'm not coming to the masjid. Maybe I'm not able to work. This is a public issue. So don't try to conceal it. Let people share and pray, and that gives me strength and consolation. It also helps the community. When people find out, I'm not the only person who has a struggle. A lot of times when people have problems with their kids, they feel very alone. Because why? Everybody else hides their struggles, pretends my kids are perfect, never have a struggle at school, never have a hard time getting married. First rishta, came and they accepted it and they were so happy. But the reality is, these are natural challenges in life. And if I, again, don't share your weaknesses, don't put your family down or yourself down, but if you have an openness, then it helps you, but it also helps other people learn and gain confidence and gain experience. So Islam is a very social religion. This is the key. When you have a social religion, there are both benefits and there are risks. And so we can talk about the benefits, and usually in our religious community, people want to talk about the benefits. Parents say, tell the kids to respect their parents. Well, yes, parents do have a right to be respected, but that relationship is only going to work if the parents are acting in a certain way towards their kids and making it easy to love them and respect them. If I make it hard for my children to love and respect me, and then 10 Maulanas come and say they should respect their parents, it's still not going to be a good relationship. Okay, so there's plus and minus. So the pros of a social religion are you have closeness, you have intimacy, you don't feel lonely. These are the issues. What are the harms? Or I should say the risks. They're not harms. What are the risks? Well, when you have a close-knit family, then you do lose some privacy. You have more likelihood of jealousy. Right? A close-knit family, because then I might say, okay, my brother has more money than I do. In a more individualistic culture, there's less jealousy. Why? Because they say, okay, he wanted to do that, he did that, I want to do this, this is my career, and they have their life, I have my life. They don't owe me anything, I don't owe them anything. And so this is a different culture. Less jealousy when you're individualistic. But when I have a close-knit culture, and there is an expectation that you must take care of your parents. It's not a choice. Do you want to take care of your parents or do you not want to take care of your parents? You must take care of your sister or your brother. It's not a choice. in America, it's a choice. Some people do it, some people don't do it. The person who doesn't do it, they don't feel condemned. That's a choice. Everybody's choice is respected. Correct? So in our culture, the possibility of jealousy, the possibility of gossip, all of these risks are higher. So what is the challenge? The challenge is that we have to develop a culture where we get the benefits, but we minimize the risks. I want to emphasize this point. I don't want to take up too much time, but this is where our communities fail. Because we just say that, all right, we should be close-knit. Parents say to their children that, you should take care of each other, don't fight. But those children are growing up in America, and in America, naturally, there is a different culture about privacy, about, my income is my income, I don't need to share the information, I don't need to share the other facts of my life, even with my close relatives. So how do you get the benefit and you avoid the risks? That's the very important challenge that all of us have. This is where the social ethics of Islam become important. So just to give one example, Prophet Muhammad they would very frequently tell jokes. This is part of the character of the Prophet. Even, I think it's a Jewish academic, he wrote an article about the humor of the Prophet. I don't remember the name right now. But he said it's very unique because we don't have this in the Hebrew Bible, we don't have this in the New Testament. Christian and Jews, they believe in the same prophets, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, and so on. But they don't have this emphasis that those prophets would have humor and that's not part of their tradition. But in the Quran, the Prophet is ala khuluqin azim. The Prophet is فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. So the Quran it doesn't mention the humor, but it mentions the background. And then many ahadith, they tell the examples. I'm sure you've heard the stories. Like an old lady came to the Prophet and said that, pray for me to go to Jannah. And Prophet Muhammad said, there's no old women in Jannah. So she started to cry. And the Prophet said, you didn't understand. When you go to Jannah, you're not going to be an old woman, inshallah. You will be young. And so this is humorous, right? But what kind of humor is it? She cried in a moment, but immediately then the Prophet gave her an extra good tiding that, this means that inshallah, if you are a mu'minah, you will be young, healthy, beautiful, all of those traits that a human being desires. So the humor of Imam Ali and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt was uplifting. It's not a prank where I lie.
It's not roasting.
It's not roasting to put somebody down. Or sometimes roasting can be done in a loving way and you lift the person, but generally and usually it's a very slippery slope. It puts a person down. And so the point is that good manners in Islam, they are defined according to a little bit of a different standard than what we might think of in the West. It's not just for love and for comfort and to have a good time in this world, but it's to create bonds that are purposeful. Let me give another example. I know this is a little bit of a long introduction, but all of these are, issues that we have in our family and in our community. Mm-hmm. The general tendency in our community is that we form bonds that are comfortable, right? So, for example, ethnically, because we have a similar language, a similar food, we just tend to prefer, let's come around people who are from our same background. Even somebody who is Muslim or Shia from another background, because they talk differently, their culture is different, their habits are different, so we tend to self-segregate. This is a normal human trait. Now, if we want to look at good relations and good manners in terms of just our own comfort, that's a personal choice. But if we're thinking of good manners in terms of building a community, if we're thinking of building an institution, where is Islam going to be in 100 years? Where is Islam going to be in 50 years? Then maybe I have to go outside of my comfort zone. And I have to build a bridge with somebody that it is not easy or automatic for me to build a bridge. Why? Because I don't want in 20 years that we say, okay, these are the, upper class Muslims, these are the working class Muslims, and then there's a class warfare. Historically, this was not part of our tradition. Right? Majalis of Imam Hussein, Salat in the Masjid, Jum'ah, Eid, it would unite. So ethnicities, languages, foods, class. As Muslims, our social ethics are what bring those things together and prevent that kind of segregation. Now, somebody might say that, what's wrong? Pakistanis have a separate masjid, Iranians have a separate masjid, Afghans have a separate masjid. There's enough people to support it, so nobody's being harmed. Well, depends. What do you think is the message of Islam? What do you think is the priority of Islam? Where do you think Islam should be in 20 years or in 30 years? Because it's not just right now that, okay, we are all in, agreement, this is easy for us, this is, yes, if you bring together an Afghan, an Iranian, a Pakistani, a white person, a black person, an Arab, you're going to have disagreements. You're going to have inefficiency. But maybe you're building a stronger foundation for 20 years or for 30 years in the future. So it's up to us, what kind of foundation do we want to build? Now, the social ethics, they become very, very important in building that foundation. Last thing I will say, even fiqh. In America, people sometimes don't appreciate the value of fiqh because they don't realize that Islam is trying to build something. So a few years ago, somebody did ask this question to me. I haven't seen it recently, but how come we have to pray in such a regimented way? Christians are so comfortable, they can do, get on their knee before bedtime, whenever they feel it. God, thank you for your blessings. Oh God, give me this. No wudu, no qibla, no tilawat, no ruku, no, so, heartfelt. First of all, we have that. We have dua. You can do it on your knees. Even in the bathroom, you can do dua. There's dhikr and dua that's intimate, right? Wherever you are. Qibla, tahara, doesn't matter. But why do we have such a strict salah? Well, you can see this in Hajj, you can see this in Umrah, you can see this in Ziyarat. That I go, somebody from China who speaks no word of my language comes, somebody from Nigeria who speaks no word of either of our languages comes. And adhan is called Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And we all know what we're doing. We can form a bond. So when you want to build a grave, big goal, a solid unity, fiqh is very important because it's a glue. Your personality is different from my personality. But when we have rules and laws and we follow those rules and laws, then even if our language doesn't meet, our personality doesn't meet, then we can still have a glue. And so by fiqh, I don't just mean the laws, but I mean the whole package of our laws and our traditions and those things that bind us and cement us. So keep that in mind when it comes to social bonds. All right. Now, to come to good manners, one of the important points in Islam is that good manners are not meant to be for a purpose. Sometimes in a customer service setting, they might say the customer is always right because it's good for business, or it has a benefit for you. Our understanding of good manners in Islam is not for a benefit. It's for the sake of Allah. So even if I don't earn more profit, even if the person does not appreciate me and thank me, and then it's still important. Now, the immediate benefit you will get is peace of mind. But sometimes you will not even get peace of mind. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a family member. Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a mother-in-law who puts you down. Sometimes maybe it's a sibling. You feel like, or a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law. Sometimes there are these relationships. This person is just, they always say something to make fun of me or to put me down. And so when you have good manners, you don't feel peace of mind. Your feeling is, I need to take revenge. I need to give a Turki ba Turki kind of a response. Then I'll feel a little bit of a satisfaction. What we call tashafi. I'll feel, if I give a tit for tat response. Even that immediate catharsis or satisfaction is not the goal. It's for Allah. So if you do that, eventually you will get a higher tranquility, but it might not be an immediate catharsis. Right now, your heart might say, go ahead and be mean. Go ahead and expose their secret so they know how it feels. And it might it'll give you some peace. But that is a shallow peace. It's not going to be for the soul and for the hereafter. These days, some of you may have seen, I don't know if you've heard of this or not, there's actually now an industry where when you get anger, they have places you can go, you can throw axes, or you can break things. So they give you a sledgehammer, and have you heard of this?
Yeah.
So this is an idea, and now there are some studies that show that it doesn't actually this is maybe something you can speak about more from a mental health perspective, but I did read one study that it actually doesn't help people get better results, because it can sometimes it increases the anger. And from an Islamic perspective, that's not something that we are recommended. Instead, what do? We say, no, you have that issue, don't deny it, but go and talk to Allah. Right? One of the best examples we have is somebody came to Imam Sadiq, and what if your parents are abusive? And so how do you respond? The Imam said that you can say to them, Yaghfirullahu lakuma, may Allah forgive you. Now that's a kind word, qawlan ma'rufa, but it's also recognizing that this is you're not denial. So you're not going and, all right, my mom got mad at me, so now I'm going to go and yell at my husband or my wife, or I'm going to go and smash a old TV, or I'm going to throw an axe, at a picture of that person that's offended me. Instead, you're recognizing, even to the first person's face, that injustice, but you're not doing it in an aggressive manner. May Allah forgive you, this is wrong. I'm acknowledging it is wrong, but I'm doing so in a delicate manner. And then I go back in my solitude, I talk to Allah. And when I talk to Allah, then I get lasting peace and tranquility. So bottom line, you're not doing it for a material benefit, you're not doing it even for that immediate peace of mind, you're doing it for the sake of Allah. Which means sometimes you should not have too much good manners. This is an important part. The details are in the lesson. On page 87, you can take a look. sometimes, we start to praise people too much. Some people, they say this, that I'm conflict averse, or I'm conflict avoidant. That's not the point in Islam. So it's not good manners if I don't have courage. Sometimes we mistake that I don't have the courage to speak up, so I just stay silent. I think, well, it's good manners. So that's not good manners. That's cowardice. If something is wrong, say it's wrong. Or at least be willing to say it's wrong, have the courage, then ask, would Allah want me to speak up, or would Allah want me to be silent? Don't be silent because you want to have a good reputation. Don't be silent because the person that you're talking to is influential or rich or powerful and you want to, get some benefit from them. So good manners is important, but there is potential excess, too much joking, compromising with what is falsehood, maintaining the friendship of indecent people. These are the extreme of good manner, which is harmful to you and to society. All right. So, any questions on the good manners chapter? There's a balance. You do it for the sake of Allah, and good manners is different from lacking the courage to speak up. Sometimes you pick a fight, and that's if something is wrong, then you should have the courage to speak up. And a lot of people make that confusion, that I want to be, kind, and so somebody is saying something haram in a majlis, somebody says something ghulu, I'll just, I'll be kind. But this is not the time to be kind, this is the time to stand up.
Yeah. Related to this bullying, like if you are getting bullied, basically then you have to respond. But if you see somebody else getting bullied, in that case, what would be the mannerism? Like, should
It's
you
even
defend?
more, no, it's more important for other people. This is an obligation to stand up for other people. If you see bullying, then in our culture, because there's a little bit of an expectation of privacy, people might say, mind your own business, so you have to be careful. But the principle in Islam is, if I see somebody's being treated unfairly by a family member, by a spouse, by a parent, then I should intervene. Society dies when people think, this is not my business, I'm not going to get involved. But how you intervene, if it's an extended family system, a culture that accepts it, it's one way. If the culture is individualistic, then you have to intervene in a different way. So the principle is feel a responsibility and intervene. For your nephews, your nieces, your brothers, your sister, even non-relative, child or adult, try to be constructive. But do so in a way that first obligation is don't alienate. So just to give a very simple example, let's say that I know somebody is always sarcastic about their spouse. It could be a woman always talking bad about her husband, or a husband maybe always kind of aggressive or dismissive to his wife, right? So if you were to scold that person, maybe you think that, I've had enough, I should just tell them, stop it. That might have the opposite effect. They might get defensive. They might cut off the relationship. They might go to the spouse and even become more angry that you said this or something. So it can have a negative effect. So your intervention is not itmam hujjah. Your intervention is to have a constructive role. Therefore, what can you do? Depending on the relationship, maybe you just socialize more. Maybe sometimes you sympathize. You say, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I can relate to it. This is something that everybody goes through. So you can kind of sometimes moderate the the sense that people have that, I have this terrible problem. Sometimes you can push back and defend the person. Sometimes you can just be present and, getting a person out of their, especially after COVID, a lot of people have kind of entered into a little bit of a shell. And, take them out of their shell, their, broaden their horizon, that can help the relationship. If you have a relationship with the other person, the child or the person who is there, then ask them, what can I do? How can I help? So you have to be careful. Sometimes you can't go to that person. It might be difficult, or it might do more harm than good. But the key is feel a responsibility, intervene, and then see what is, based on the situation, what is the most healthy way to intervene. But the key difference is that in Islam, it's not a choice. It is a responsibility. The emotional, spiritual, and the material well-being of my community is my responsibility. Not just as a leader or a Maulana, but as a Muslim. الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. You're awliya of each other, guardians, in every way. Physical, spiritual, emotional, economic and material and everything. Good.
I have a more of a fundamental question. We know that the personality is a makeup of environmental factors, temperamental, genetics, upbringing, many different things. And akhlaq, these are natural things. What makes the akhlaq Islamic? You know what I mean? Because the way I understand is, brain or shower, you think of कोई चीज़ मुज़र है या मुफीद है, या कोई चीज़ जो है अपने आपको किसी रग़बत है या कराहत है, या or something is beautiful and not beautiful. But there has to be something that separates, makes the akhlaq Islamic. What is it that makes it Islamic? Because the virtues of goodness and stuff existed before,
Well, they existed, but true. But there's a misconception some people have that what makes something Islamic is if it's in the Quran and Hadith. Huh? Ma'ruf and munkar are in our fitrah. In fact, if something is not in Quran and Hadith and it's in our fitrah or in our aql, that's usually because it's even more important. Therefore, Allah can change the Sharia. We have Jum'ah, maybe the Jews had Saturday. We have the Qibla of Makkah, before that it was Baytul Maqdis. So the Qibla can change, and everything is, whatever, it's important, but Allah can change it from Judaism to Christianity to Islam. But is Allah going to change the prohibition of murder? For Jews, murder is haram, but for Christians, it's okay. So the Qibla can change. The day of congregation can change. The form of salat can change. Maybe, we have 2 sujood, maybe for some other sharia it was 1 sujood. This is up to Allah. He changes it based on His wisdom, but He changes it. But avoid alcohol, avoid gambling, avoid gossiping. Are these going to change from one sharia to another? No. So this is Islamic. Although it doesn't depend on a hadith or an ayah. But it is the fitrah or the aql is also from God. If you have something that is good, that is intrinsically Islamic, if you have the intention of doing it for God, then it brings you close to God. So, let's say I do a good deed, but I'm an atheist. Is that Islamic? Yes, it is Islamic ethics. If I'm generous and I'm kind and I have good attributes, I am an atheist, but I have Islamic ethics. I don't have the salat and the, ibadah, saum, but I have the Islamic ethics of generosity or good manners and so on. But it's only with the intention that you are able to move close to Allah. And that requires, of course, iman, and then it requires the dhikr, which is remembrance of God. If I don't have dhikr, tawajjuh, then I'm not going to move close to God. So what is Islamic is anything that is pleasing to God. But that Islamic ethics will only bring you close to God based on your intention.
So then from your answer, the way I understand it, is if I see something good or bad, but the word of God trumps it. So, so it could be good or bad, but for me as a Muslim or as a Shia Muslim, what that would trump. So maybe if I let's say, for example, alcohol, like alcohol, but if, God has prohibited it, even though it might be, pleasing to me, but I cannot use it. So they,
God, the word of God does trump it, but what the best phrasing is, let's not use the word trump, because trump can kind of imply that Allah kind of cancels. But we should, the word is complete or complement. In other words, if I find alcohol pleasing, there might be some good things in alcohol. And the Quran itself says, right? فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. There are some benefits. Gambling has benefits. Socially, it's a fun activity. Maybe there's other benefits, I don't know. Alcohol, a lot of people say that alcohol is what allows me to tolerate my family in Thanksgiving. So that's this is a real thing people say. It is maybe physically, maybe another thing that people say. I don't know if this is true or not. That before modern sanitation, drinking water would often have the potential for infection and for health problems. But because fermented drinks don't have the same bacteria, so in some ways, sometimes carrying alcohol with you was less likely to make you physically healthy than carrying water with you. So maybe these are benefits. That you get sick drinking unfiltered water, but you won't get sick drinking beer because beer doesn't have the same germs. But this is, the Quran says, مَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. But وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. For this one benefit, you don't get a stomach ache, but you have abuse and divorce and so many battles and so many spiritual and social harms. Get the stomach ache, or learn how to take better care of your water, boil it, and avoid the alcohol. So the point is that what it is Allah, He doesn't trump our aql and fitra in the sense of canceling it. He completes it. There are certain things we can see, and what we see is actually maybe accurate. People say, well, alcohol is good. Allah doesn't deny there might be some manafi', but what He says is, I can tell you certain things that you don't know. Maybe it's going to show up in 30 years. Maybe it's going to show up in the akhirah. So it's completion.
Related to this, I think Ahkam is separate, but we are talking about more mannerisms and social impact. So Amar bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar, I think that's where the mannerism comes. And the Maruf is what's commonly known good between the people that you're interacting with. That particular person may not, because they're doing something wrong, obviously they don't know, but it's considered to be good commonly. So if we are interacting with, say, Christians, we may not tell them about pork because they don't consider it bad.
Exactly.
But we may talk about alcohol because they also consider it bad.
Or gambling,
socially,
for example,
gambling, So it's more like you are basically have manners, how to first of all figure out what's commonly good.
And that's relative.
Yeah.
That's because, let's say that I'm talking to an atheist. So we still have Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar.
Yeah.
But it would be those things that we agree on.
Yeah. Don't steal or
Don't steal.
kill.
Let's take care of the homeless homeless, these. Then if I have a Christian, I can say, well, let's honor God. You believe Jesus is divine, I don't believe Jesus is divine, but we still have a shared belief in family, in traditional values, in God. So we have the boundary of ma'ruf and munkar, it becomes more similar. Then with a Muslim, it might even include ahkam. So with a Muslim, even salat and saum are part of ma'ruf and munkar. So the ma'ruf and munkar are based on what level society has. And the goal is, let's protect the values within society by advocating for what is good and advocating against what is harmful and what is bad. But if, to your point, if one society doesn't recognize something as bad, then don't focus on that. But don't separate yourself from society and then become irrelevant. This is a risk Muslims have in America because the culture is so un-Islamic that we become irrelevant. We say, this is not my responsibility. No, even in this society, there are ma'ruf and munkar that we should have a voice when it comes to social responsibilities, even when it comes to moral issues. There's so many problems in society that we can have a consensus with a non-Muslim. That's ma'ruf. And there are so many things that we can have a consensus that are bad, that's munkar. So we should form that relationship on that basis. And if you do that, the good thing is that eventually people will learn more about what is ma'ruf and munkar. Because once you have one good model of pious behavior, this is how Islam used to spread. People would see Muslims are cleaner, kinder, more fulfilling lives, and they would be attracted and they would accept Islam. I'm not generalizing, but this is a big reason why Islam spread in so many different parts of the world, in Indonesia, Malaysia, India, China, in many places. There's actually a study that I read that, contrary to Hindu propaganda, the biggest spread of Islam was when Muslim political power became weaker. So the widest spread of Islam was after the Mughal power had started to weaken. That's when you had the fastest kind of growth of Islam. So it wasn't military power or compulsion, but it was often people said, this is a better religion. This is more, the ma'ruf and munkar are a big part. But if we don't do ma'ruf and munkar, right, and what people see is that I'm sloppy and I'm, dishonest, and I'm, my community is disorganized, then we're not going to have a model to introduce Islam for our own generation, but also for future generations. This is one reason. So last thing I'll say. This is one reason why it's very important for us to invest in ways to introduce Islam to society, because sometimes we think that Islam is going to be benefited by learning or scholarship or content. This is important, but for the long-term interest of Islam, you also need an aesthetic. What I mean by aesthetic is beauty, that people see a good society, a good environment, then their heart feels at peace. That this is where I want to raise my family. This is what I want to aspire. Because I've dealt with a lot of people who marry a non-Muslim. And the biggest thing that I've seen is people say, that this is a good person. I really feel comfortable with this person. I just never. May Allah, protect all of our families and our children. But what will stop that? if my child says, you know what, taharat and najasat are important, coming to the masjid is important, halal and haram food is important, right? The whole environment, if I can only feel at home when I have purity in my physical environment and my spiritual environment, the end result will be that then people will not, consider an option which is outside of that. And that's where we need to put more effort, create the whole environment so that not everybody is going to be motivated by religious motives. Inshallah, we will train our kids, raise our kids to do that, but some of them are going to have different personalities. Even the ones who are not religious, we want them to stay within the fold of religion. And it's going to be our social and not just our religious aspect that's going to do that. It's not the Ashura Majlis or the Laylatul Qadr program, but the picnic or these things are going to be very effective. So anyhow, don't want to be too long-winded, but the social aspect, which is rooted in good manners, it plays a bigger role in protecting Islam over the long term than we assume. It plays a bigger role in spreading Islam than many people assume. And inshallah, that's something that we can give more attention to. Any final questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I had a comment that it's a very delicate issue when you are doing nahi and munkar. For example, it's funny, it's a very funny incident. My mother-in-law, my aunt, Masood's mother, she had a friend, and that friend was Christian, very devoted Christian. And once she said, I feel so sorry for you, my dear friend, because you are going to go to hell. And because you are a Muslim, and you are going to go to hell. She was Christian, yeah. And she was telling my mother-in-law that you're such a nice lady, I want to help you. And I want, just when I see sometimes I feel so sorry for you that this lady is going to go to hell and I'm going to try to bring her back. So please do this and do that. And my aunt was, she was smiling. She said, no, we have our own thing. And then she said, it's better, you follow your own religion. And I believe that if you are a good person, you are going to go to heaven. So it's very, very, very delicate thing what you tell others. And what you are thinking, they are completely opposite of that, and you might lose your friends. Because my aunt was, educated. She knew what she meant, and she was okay. It was fine. She was still with friends with her, but you start losing friends. And sometimes it's better to just say, okay, you follow your own thing, and let's follow our own thing, and let's be friends.
Yeah, it is a delicate thing. One thing that can help, I think, is if we prepare answers for those situations. So it's a good conversation to have with kids. Play a little game. If your friend comes to you and says this, you're going to hell. How would you respond? Your aunt's response was perfect. Another way you can say that is that, well, I believe that I'm following the teachings of Jesus better than depending on how close you are, you can say that. Don't create a fight. But if you're very close to somebody, then you can say that. All right, Christian, Jesus prayed. We pray. Jesus never ate pork. We don't eat pork. Jesus, your own pictures of Maryam have her modestly dressed. We maintain those modest dresses. So, and there are books that are written about this, that the early teachings of Prophet Jesus and the early followers of Prophet Jesus were Muslims, not by name, but in practice, Islam is the most similar to their teachings. But you can prepare an answer for atheists that you are oppressed. This is I've seen it in my own family. innocent question. I took my daughter to the dentist. The dentist said to her, "Oh, are you allowed to choose your own outfits?" Innocent question. But if she was wearing a tank top, or shorts, nobody would ask, "Are you allowed to choose your own dress?" Only because it's hijab. So sometimes it's an innocent question. How do you respond? You might not even realize, that person might not even realize that they're being offensive. Maybe they're, trying to be respectful. But especially with younger kids, and even as adults, sometimes I get confused. How do I respond? Maybe you'll get confused if somebody says you're going to hell. So be prepared. First thing is diffuse tension. So usually debates and fights are not worth the effort. Even if you can make a point, even if you can shut the other person up and you can, give a solid answer, it's still, in the end, there's no prize or no benefit. So one, diffuse tension. If you're friends, then you can engage. For example, with a Christian, you can say that, well, we try to follow the teachings of Jesus fully. And, you can even introduce them to some of the verses in the Quran about Isa and Maryam alayhi salam.
What I have noticed is, and this is when I come across, the younger generation, the churches are more welcoming and more forgiving than our mosques. So that is one of the things that the younger generation, they don't feel they can measure up to their practices or the rituals. And they kind of, they don't go to churches, but they stay away.
Yeah.
Or rather they say, okay, it is your actions which is more important. And who are the people who run the mosques, who are they? They are not our judges. It is God who's the judge. So what advice do you have for the youth?
Well, for those people who feel that, I would say try to get involved. And it's like a family. If you believe
Right.
that, if your parents don't understand you, then they're still your parents. You build a relationship. So the same thing with our mosques, our centers, they're institutions.
Mhm.
And you might not be able to, overthrow the board and change everything right away, but the relationship is still important. The second thing is that a lot of times there are changes that are possible. I was talking with a person about how English Majalis started in Idare Jafariya. And what he was describing, and many of you know Amjad Sadir, right? So apparently, from what I heard, this is the second person told me, so the details may not be 100% accurate, secondhand. They said that they were trying for a long time to get English Majalis, and it wasn't getting the approval. And then there was somebody who said that, I attend Majalis for the last 10 years, I don't speak Urdu. From a Pakistani or Indian background, but they just never learned the language. And so, I'm thinking of, what am I getting out of this? And then, Brother Amjad, he said that, no, we're going to do this. Then I said that, how can we make it work? And I remember when it started, it was a Bachon ka program. It wasn't a full-fledged, respected program. It was kind of a side, 20, 30 people. But now, see how different it is. It's been less than 20 years, I think. Maybe about 20 years, right? Something like that. In the grand scheme of things, 20 years is not a big deal. For a youth, it might seem like 20 years, you want me to be patient for 20 years. But once that institution is there, that institution can benefit and people will learn and they'll go so many places. So what I would say to the youth is, number one, be a little bit more patient. Number two, sometimes you can change things. It just seems like there's a resistance, but if you're connected, if you're active, if you're involved, then even if there's resistance, that change is possible. The other message, though, is not for the youth; it's for the people who are often resistant to change. And you shouldn't be resistant to change. You maybe have grown up with a certain kind of azadari, you may have be comfortable with it, you're familiar with it, but if you are the obstacle for a positive change in society because your comfort, then I'm not going to say Allah is going to punish you, that Allah knows best, but you are an obstacle, you're losing a good opportunity for Islam to grow and strengthen and for youth to become more active. What's going to happen? They're still going to maybe have iftar, but they'll go to a restaurant, they won't come to the masjid. I would much rather a young person come to the masjid for iftar than a restaurant. Why? Because there'll be at least jamaat. There'll be at least some remembrance. But then the masjid should be welcoming. Otherwise, I can't blame the child for saying, you know what, I fasted, I want to get together with my friends. I don't want an auntie or an uncle just to yell at me, so part of the message for the youth, part of the message is for our institutions and elders.
I have a comment about that as well, kind of connects to this, so I'll just say that and I'll
Sure.
repeat the question. I have a lot of friends that are from different faiths, and I feel like I understand the sentiment. I think the obstacle perhaps to why the Christian institutions are more welcoming is colonization, right? Because I feel like people, especially young people, are going to prefer American values and the way that churches work, right? Obviously, there's charity and good social ethics, but then they also might have music, they might have different things that make it Christmas, for example, if we can take that as an example. Like you tell my nephew, and I've told him, right? Like Christmas, we don't really celebrate it, but there's cool stuff there that no matter what you do in Eid, Christmas is still Christmas.
Yeah, it's the
And
whole
so-
country.
Sorry?
It's the whole culture and the whole country.
Exactly. So I feel like that's a contributing factor to why people are attracted towards it. And I don't know if we will ever get to that because we have our own kind of Muslim framework of things. And I feel like that's somehow, that's what I think. I feel like it's somehow always going to be lower level just because we are in this culture.
Minority.
And I don't know if we want to go ahead and try to race them on it, I don't know, that's what I think.
Yeah,
And
but-
there is something also I've noticed, among the Shias versus the Sunnis, I guess the way the Sunnis, I hope there's no Sunni here, they are more simplistic rather. We go more into rituals and from what I've heard from the youth, okay, life is so busy, how do we practice our religion? We just adhere to those simple, practices. So that was my, I think that was what I noticed among, and so they are of course, I think it is a good thing for our ummah to, to socialize with other people, other, sects and other communities. But yet again, we have to keep the message of the Ahl Bayt important.
Yeah, I think, so one thing that Sunnis, they're a little bit, they have an easier time is that their programs are a little bit less tied to culture and food. So Jum'ah, Jama'at, Taraweeh, right? Pakistani and Bengali and Nigerian and Syrian, they can come very easily together.
Adam Center is a perfect example.
Huh?
Adam Center is a
Perfect
perfect
example.
example.
Pray and leave, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. The good thing is that exactly it makes it more accessible. It's kind of somewhat similar to the church. The bad thing, or the flip side, is that it's more open to both secularization, which Adam Center is also a little bit of an example of, and it's also open to extremism. So the Shia, because we have a closer tie to culture, generally every program that you have at a Shia home or center, there will be food, except today because it's Ramadan. Right? But
You can always pack.
Next time.
Inshallah. But you know what I mean, that we have a, poetry and a cultural aspect and food, so that it prevents secularization because it's a deeper connection. It prevents extremism because it's a moderating influence, but it also can become insular. So it's a difficult challenge. Like this is something that we're working on, in Imam al-Asr for iftar. if we have a very bland iftar, that a lot of people will say this is not, this is not a good iftar. If you have a very spicy iftar, imagine if it's just a, nahari, and somebody from a culture that can't digest it. We had last year some people brought their own individual iftar. They came, but they had to bring their own iftar. So you can't meet every need. This year, what we're trying to do is we say that have 2 dishes and bring some, and we'll see how it goes. But the point is, you have to make an effort. Don't say that, well, we're serving nahari. If you don't like it, then go find somebody someplace else. No, it's a value system. It's a priority. But then there's no single solution. In the end, I believe the Shia culture has much more potential, because Islam without a cultural backing is often very shallow.
Yeah, great.
So this is a stronger potential, but we have to really work. Potential is like talent. If you're a very talented person but you do no practice, you're not going to be a world-class, athlete or whatever skill you have. So we have that potential, but we have a lot of work to do to develop that potential, to utilize that potential, and it's going to require people to say this is not the obvious or the easy thing, but this is the right thing. And to the colonization point, that's also very true. That it's easy. We visited some of the churches near our new site. They have a band. Their youth group is basically kind of just do not whatever you want, but basically whatever you want and add the name Jesus. So it's not really a whole lot of discipline. I'm not trying to make fun of a religion, but just sort of describe a difference. They might say that's better, and we might say this. Our perspective is better. But when you have a religion like Islam, it is more disciplined. You can't just have a youth group and have mixed gatherings, have music, have dance, have bingo or gambling. You have those things. So then, what is the solution? Well, it's kind of like food. Most of you probably have enough of a habit of eating healthy that junk food is not as appealing to you as it might be to somebody who's never had experience of really healthy, wholesome, good food. Right? You have to develop a taste for what is healthy and wholesome. And sometimes you drive by McDonald's and you smell, the French fries, and it still kind of has a little bit of a pull. But if you have a habit of good food, it's easier for you to say, no, I'm not going to give in. So that's our challenge. That we're not trying to compete with churches. We're not trying to, again, I don't want to say that it's junk food. I'm just giving an example. But we're not trying to just, pull people in. We're not trying to compete with Sunni masajid either, right? Our religion, our culture, it is formed by the Prophet, by Ahlul Bayt, for a specific purpose. And one of the things that Shia culture is formed for is to be a catalyst for change. I want to just say this, I know that we're now at the end of our time, but because I see a lot of people, they say, well, why are the Shia, doing resistance? Our ulama are becoming shaheed, our, institutions are decimated, and the Sunnis don't even care. They don't have any gratitude. They don't now. Some of you may have heard that the Saudi are broadcasting a Ramadan series about Muawiyah. Have you heard of that? Maybe you'll see it in the news. Dude, it's in praise of Muawiyah as a hero. The same people who did the Omar series. Some of you may have heard about the Omar series a few years ago. Now they're making one on Muawiyah, the hero of Islam and the hero of the Arabs. So a lot of Shia, young Shia I've seen now, they're like, well, why are we doing this? Who are we fighting for? But remember, Imam Ali, he could have fought against Saqifah, but his goal was to be a catalyst for the betterment of the Ummah. So our training, our values, our institutions were built by Ahlul Bayt to be a catalyst for the Ummah. And therefore, yes, we have sacrifice, we have people calling us kafir, we have shuhada, we have, hardship. But if we can bring the ummah and humanity to a better place, then we have fulfilled the mission of Ahlul Bayt in our capacity. Does that make sense? That don't think of the challenge as we're competing with a church or competing with a Sunni masjid. We have our own goal. And our goal and our role is to be a role model for even the Sunni or the church or anybody who is interested in having a relationship. We should show them a model of the Islam of Prophet Muhammad, the Islam of Imam Ali, the Islam of Fatima Zahra, the Islam of Ahlul Bayt. That'll maybe bring them close to Islam, or even if they don't convert to school of Ahlul Bayt, hopefully it will help make them a better person.
I just wanted to sort of dispel what the sisters are comment, and this is in defending youth also. It's not that Shia centers are not welcoming. They're not. I mean, the argument is that a youth comes into a center. Let's say, as an example of Idara Jafi. I've been part of a bigger organization, small organization. My point is, they're not unwelcoming, right? You have to also take an initiative as a youth, because organizations like Idara, as an example, have 2,000 people. You don't know who are the board of directors. You don't know who are the board of trustees. You don't know all the other organizational people who are there. They can't be going on and welcoming you if you're a new person. I think when we say this, it kind of creates this division. Well, youth is always feeling unwelcome when you go to these big centers. I think that youth also has to be like, my name is this. I just came to this area. I think they're lacking that sort of a initiative. I feel that because you don't feel that in the smaller centers. But smaller centers are very easy to get. You can talk to everyone all the time, and who's new, who's not new. But I think the argument that we constantly say that our massages are not welcoming, I don't.
I think it's a community, not.
Yeah, exactly. That's
frustration.
I think it's the community,
Community.
yeah.
It's always a community. That's what I'm saying. It's
The
like,
feedback
yeah.
that I got was like, they're very judgmental.
Again, that's also
So
subjective,
that is
right?
probably maybe an individualistic experience. So that is what we as, we are the senior generation, we have to set a good bar and, be more like
Absolutely.
welcoming and, we have to do more because this is our youth,
So one thing that I think is helpful, I mean, labels can be sometimes helpful and sometimes they can be misleading as well. So, for example, a lot of feminists in America, they believe in this narrative that women have been oppressed for all of human history. You've all heard that narrative, right? The reality is that for most of human history, people lived in very hierarchical societies. And, if you've ever read battle stories in history, do you think most of those people, the men, chose to fight? They were forced. In some ways, their women were free more than the men were. In some ways, the men were more free than the women because they generally were able to be kind of kings in their own home. But it's not a narrative that fits either the feminist narrative or the opposing. Now they have this men's narrative, which is against feminism. My point is that the narratives sometimes are helpful, but they also generalize. We don't have a 10,000-year history of women being oppressed or men being oppressed. We just have, the complicated relationships of human history. What's more helpful, labels can be useful because you need words to talk. But what's more helpful is to look at the trajectory and the dynamic. So let me just take Imam al-Asr right now. Right? Imam al-Asr right now. Are there judgmental people? Absolutely. Is it opening and welcoming? We try to be. But look at the trajectory. Where are we in need of improvement? So I gave one example, like last year, I noticed that some people, they started bringing their own iftar or they came less after, a few times. So this is It's not that we're labeling, we are welcoming, we are not welcoming. We just see, okay, this is something we need to do better. Because we want to cater to people. We don't want to say this is a Pakistani center. If you don't like Pakistani food, then, go to Crescent. If you want to go to Crescent, that's not to stop you. But the point is that we want you to feel welcome. So in general, when it comes to any of these kinds of social issues, I think less than the label, focus on the trajectory. And focus on the trajectory in a constructive, and this is what we need to improve. Right? Maybe it's one step improvement. Like we still have a problem with waste. We still have a problem with, in all of our centers, that generally people sit with their own comfort group. Like if I know you, then I'll come and I'll sit next to you. But if you just walked in, you just moved to DC yesterday, most of us are not going to say, oh, what's your name? Where do you live? How is it going? What's your family doing? And then and if you're from my culture, maybe I'll say, okay, I'll welcome you into my social group. But if you're not from my culture, probably I won't even welcome you into my social group. So we have this problem that a lot of people, they come to the Eid prayer, and then we go with our families, and a lot of, new Shia, new converts, they're isolated. Can you turn off the camera for a second? So just last week, I found out about